we are the last session of the day, but it's going to be really exciting because we're going to hear all about what the Combined Authority are doing for all of us. So we welcome Charles and Anna. Their titles there: Charles, King of Social Enterprise in the West Midlands, Strategic Lead for the Economy Growth for the West Midlands Combined Authority, and Anna, Strategic Lead for Inclusive Growth. They're going to talk to us today about the growth of the social economy in the West Midlands and particular emphasis on business support, procurement and social value and employment. So we're going to kick off with Anna, who's going to talk about public procurement through Combined Authority and how it's going to be a driver for inclusive growth, the approach Combined Authority is taking, and whether recent policy announcements change this picture. Anna.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Fab. So hi, I'm Anna. I work really closely with Charles at the Combined Authority and also Dan on how we drive inclusive growth and all that we're delivering across our policies, investments, procurement opportunities. So inclusive growth is all about how we're maximising our social and environmental and economic impact across the West Midlands region. And for those familiar with the work of Mariana Mazzucato and Kate Raworth's donut economics theory, I'm getting a few nods, great. And we're trying to instil that kind of work in what we're doing as a combined authority and in partnership with our local authority partners. So in terms of the focus today, I wanted to look at how social value is actually a really natural delivery vehicle to achieving the fundamentals to inclusive growth around the health and well-being of our citizens, around ensuring that our places can thrive environmentally, looking at inclusive economy opportunities such as things that you guys are doing around the social economy and the voluntary community and faith sectors as well. So we've recently been on a bit of a journey, I think it's fair to say, at the Combined Authority with our approach to social value, and we're really conscious that this is something that we need to be driving forward and actually jumping on some of the latest policy announcements and legislative changes, because they're a real opportunity to drive change. One of the things that we're quite conscious of is that our social value policy is kind of out of date at this point. So with the new legislative changes that have come in, it's been a real driver for us to go, right, how do we use our inclusive growth missions around the different areas of social and environmental impact to really drive what we're getting and maximising our investment opportunities? So in terms of the kind of strategic approach to that, because that's kind of where I sit within the organisation, we really want to firm up around the governance that we do with social value, how we better evaluate it, and how we recognise what the barriers might be for small to medium enterprises and social economy organisations. Things like ensuring that the portals that we use, I hear that they're not always that popular, but making sure that in that and kind of the back office bit of it, so the indicators or the themes, outcomes and measures, the TOMs that we use, are creating that fair environment to really enable organisations such as yourselves that you represent. You can be looking at kind of public procurement as a way to kind of maximise local economic resilience for us, because that's quite key. Apologies, there's a few buzzwords in here, I know. But I think at the heart of that is really our commitment as an authority to be maximising and leveraging public spending in the way that it should be, increasing the local resilience of our places. And I think the final bit I would just touch on there is probably the most recent piece of legislation that I've come across, which is the National Procurement Policy Statement that was released in February of 2025. And when I was reading through that, the bits that really stuck out to me were the focus on innovation and the need to really be engaging better with our smaller businesses and making sure that they kind of understand the procurement process and it's a fairer policy across the whole piece. Because of course there's those major investment changes to drive infrastructure, but unless our supply chains are strong and we've got that stability locally, it's going to be really hard to drive the growth changes that we would like to see as a region to improve living standards. So I think I'll leave it there, if that's all right, and hand over to Charles, who I know is working with me on this really closely. Thanks.
Thank you. Charles, over to you.
Yeah, I think I said in the first session that a lot of what we do is about not just investment and money and actions and projects. It's about systemic change and things. So the changes in the procurement regulations and a different more precise approach to social value and the Social Value Act gives us an opportunity to start to re-engineer the way we go about procurement. So there are a number of things that have happened behind the scenes to take advantage of that legislation in the way that we award contracts. And there will be things like targets set for the number of contracts awarded to SMEs and the number of the percentage of contracts awarded to social enterprise. we will be looking at ways in which we can adjust the financial obstacles and barriers that are often present with those things as well. The work, which I'll talk about in a moment, that we're doing with some social investors, is about then making the finance and funding available for you to take on social contracts. There are changes in the way that payment terms are, so there'll be a guaranteed 30-day payment on all contracts. And the way that we use social value will be in a number of parts. So we'll be looking at the intrinsic social value that is designed into a programme in the very first place. So commissioners will be asked to go through a process to understand what the social value is within that thing, that can be written into the contract as hard specification. And the stuff that Anna does around the inclusive growth toolkit and the inclusive growth framework is fundamental to some of the stuff that I do, because it's a systemic change in the way we work. So we can use that toolkit as a way of ensuring that everything we do goes through that inclusive lens. We'll also be looking at the way that social value is reported from a provider as well. So we'll be looking at intrinsic value from an organisational point of view. So as a social enterprise, you do social value. That's what you do. 100% of what you do is social value. To do what we have historically done, which is ask for additional social value, is incredibly hard for a social enterprise to do, because you're already doing 100% of it. So why don't we take account and use the same yardstick and the same measure to look at the value that you deliver as part of your day-to-day operations, as part of your intrinsic organisational value. And that will be what you do. You're not asked to provide additionality, you're asked to just state what you already do. Now, if you can deliver additionality, that helps you enormously as well, because you can actually say, we do all these things, winning this contract will allow us to do X more. That would be great. It's to strengthen that playing field and to give you that opportunity to say, we already do really good stuff. And I forgot what the other thing was now. There's another thing as well. Oh yeah, the way that we apportion. I'm not a great fan of targets for social value in a contract, that social value must account for 10% or whatever it is. I like the one that, was it Jeff that said 80%? Now that's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good target. But the problem with setting a target of 10% is 10% doesn't become the minimum, it becomes the maximum, it becomes a default setting. So we're upping it slightly, we're going to make it 20%. And there is some conversations around, if we then do a net zero thing on top of that, so there's an environmental benefit as well as social benefit, could we make it 30%? Because that's what they do in Greater Manchester and Manchester City Council, and Greater Manchester is a great benchmark because we always want to beat them. So there's lots of stuff going on behind the scenes to make contracts more accessible to it. But I think we need to do some stuff around other work as well, which is about, and this comes on to the business support thing and the clusters thing as well and the infrastructure thing, is that 9,314 organisations I talked about before, so many of them are small micro organisations. They're not going to be able to bid for or secure public sector contracts or private sector contracts for that matter on their own. So building partnerships, building consortia that you can do to take on those contracts, I think is very important. So the work you're doing in the clusters by bringing people together, partnerships are a very difficult thing to do because it's about building trust and faith and, and confidence with each other. So bringing people together to get to know each other and get to understand how they can work together is the first stage of building those partnerships. So there'll be a lot of stuff around business support in the future, which will look at consortia and partnership building. That's what we're aiming for on that.
I think it's really encouraging that the Combined Authority are now looking at 20%. We had Wolverhampton Procurement at our event yesterday, and they were really excited to say, we're just about to do 10%. And I reminded them that 5 years ago, they signed a pledge to say it would always be 10%, and now they're saying they've just gone up. But I did say that the Combined Authority were about to go to 20, and that they would expect local councils to follow that lead.
But yeah, there is a thing called the Social Value Network, which Anna and I are both going to get involved in. Again, it's sort of resuscitated itself, and it's got a new chair. And the purpose of that is we can't go out to local authorities and say, you must do this, unless we're prepared to do it ourselves. So people in glass houses can't throw stones. So we're going to set the pace on this one. We're going to say, this is our social impact and social value policy. This is how we're applying it in procurement. This is what we regard as being good practice and best practice to do it. And persuade them that they should follow suit in that.
Yeah, go on. I was just going to ask one more about Ed Cox. Can I just ask if anyone's seen the video that Ed Cox, Chief Executive of the Combined Authority, has done?
You'll also have to know the full 6-minute one. Oh yeah, you've seen the 2-minute one. You'll have to buy a ticket to the Gala Awards to see the full 6-minute version of that, where he goes into a lot more depth and makes a lot more statements that we really like. So, I think it's 90 quid, is it?
Yeah, but really good if you're a social economy organisation. Right, questions. Anyone have any questions? Right, Sarah?
So I would like to ask a question about procurement and social value. You're saying 20%, but we've been in a situation for the last few years where organisations have bid for contracts. They've said they will deliver 10% or 20%. Often the stuff they're doing isn't measurable. They measure it, but it's not checked in any way. And on occasions where perhaps they're doing work around employment or apprenticeships, as soon as the contract finishes, they pull the plug and the social impact disappears. What things are you going to put in place to show that the social value that's created is more sustainable and long-term? And do you have a shopping list that you're going to incorporate into the procurement processes to get organisations to make sure that the social value that's created is real?
So I can make a start with this one. One of the things that we've recently been looking into and that we need to make sure are agreed by our board are through the themes, outcomes and measures, the TOMs that we use. We've been analysing the full sort of corporate measure set, I think it's referred to as, which is about 112 that you could possibly do. We're trying to refine that down to what explicitly relates to our inclusive growth fundamentals, so 8 fundamentals there, and the different missions around areas like environment, power and participation for citizens. And I think crucially something that we've been working on over the last couple of weeks is how do we split out within that the difference between what we would say is really true additional social value and what just makes you a good partner through corporate social responsibility. So things like you've said there about apprenticeships and making sure that they're local. Some of that, I think, needs to come through how we strengthen our governance processes and how we better report and monitor delivery of social value. But the other part is in how are we benchmarking ourselves as an organisation to say, right, this is explicit social value and this is what we'd consider part of the good work agenda, that actually if we can, speaking back to the previous discussion on what other local authorities are doing as well, if we can get some great collaboration going and say, look, if we refer to corporate social responsibility as the following, this is an ambition, by the way, a passion of mine, that would be a really great way that we can then distinguish between what is that additional value and make sure that there's a set expectation in policy and also activity that says, right, if you're going to do that, that's just by default, is a hope, definitely. Charles, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the other thing about social value is what they claim to be social value will be a contractual obligation to deliver, and it will be monitored as part of the contract negotiations, and it will be measured through the sort of things that Anna's mentioned there. So there will be accountability in the system. So yeah, you're right. People have claimed social value in their contracts, and we have no idea whether it's delivered or not. I got personal experience of it from my days at SSE and having a social value partner and got nothing from it. So that's not going to happen. So it will be contractual, will be measured, it will be monitored and reported on. I did actually try this out with a bunch of corporate people. We have a thing called the Social Impact Partnership, which is a lot of the big corporates and funders and investors across the region. So I tried it out with them and said, well, what if we did this? And what if we did this with social value? And we made it a contractual obligation, and we monitored it, and we measured it, and we reported on it, and we punished you if you didn't do it. And they all, much to my surprise, they completely bought into it. They were thoroughly and totally in favour of it. Because a lot of them do a lot of things already, but nobody, and they put things into contracts, but nobody ever mentions it again, and therefore they don't feel that there's any acknowledgement in the system for the work that they do. So they'd like that to be in there.
Thank you. So we've got how many now? We've got 3 questions at the back. We'll go that way. How many?
So I will ask you a question that I was asked about 2 years ago now. We had a short partnership going with Amsterdam, with the city of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. they came over to Birmingham and we talked to them about our work across various sectors, but social economy was probably the biggest focus area. And obviously we drifted into talking about procurement and social value. And the challenge they gave me was, we have long ago come to a conclusion that social value is a waste of time and resources. Really what you need to do, you need to focus on the wording of the body of the contracts, of the body of the specification, because this is where change happens. And how you write your ask as a public sector determines everything. Because yes, it links to accountability and how you can then monitor, but it's not just the social value. Social value has become such an easy way out of obligations. You know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to focus on my growth. I will make money relentlessly. My shareholders will profit, and then I'll give you like tiny little bit here. You know, I will recycle my paper, and I will make sure that all my employees travel to work on Teslas, and I'm done. I'm great. So how would you respond to that challenge?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, actually. I've been to Amsterdam too, but I only had some funny brownies and smiled a lot. I didn't have any conversation about social value. Yeah, it would be good if we didn't have to have the Social Value Act and we could just write it into the contracts. But there is that in this, which is about the way that the commissioners actually write the specification to make sure that inclusive growth and social value is already embedded in the thinking behind it, and that's where we're trying to get to, and that's where the work that Anna's doing is so important in putting everything through that inclusive growth lens. But we're not in that position at the moment, so we have to accept that we've got to have an interim position. So I would like to see the demise of social value with you. I'd like to see it becoming unnecessary because we are writing things in a way that intrinsically brings about inclusive growth, and that I think is Anna's goal as well.
Yeah, I think I'd just add to that training and education and awareness around what we're trying to achieve is really important. So as part of this refresh and overhaul that we're doing, it's about speaking to not just procurement officers, but it's also anyone across the authority who might be in a position where they're writing a tender, that kind of thing, to go, this is what you need to look out for. Here's almost a checklist on, if it's not this kind of growth, it's not the growth we want to see. So how are you putting that into practice? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think social value to some extent has been aimed at the wrong audience within the public sector, because it's been aimed at procurement teams. That they're irrelevant to it. They shouldn't be having that responsibility. What they should be doing, all they're there to do is to manage a process to make sure you get best value for money, and it goes through a legitimate process. The trick is the social value should be owned and believed by the people commissioning the stuff in the first place. So it's designed in, and that's what we're doing. So there will be a social value role within the combined authority whose job will be, amongst other things, is to create that level of understanding amongst commissioning staff as to what they're actually doing in the first place. In the meantime, we'll also be doing a thing where we're actually being much more specific about the social value we're looking for. So we'll be able to look at the things that are important to the region, in terms of, you know, the levels of poverty or economic inactivity, or it could be digital inclusion, it could be anything at all, it could be an environmental thing, and actually presenting the companies with a shopping list that says, these are the things that we want you to focus on, come back to us with that. So, and again, private sector, we're great, that helps us thinking. What I'd like to do is be able to then say to them, here's a directory, where's she gone? Of social enterprises delivering that, because I've had conversations with people about, well, don't create something new, don't reinvent the wheel. There is somebody out there doing exactly what you are trying to do, so partner up with them. Atkins Realis is a great example of that. They're doing a lot of stuff where they're actually not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're going and finding partners, delivery partners to do it. And I think there's an appetite and an opportunity there with the corporate sector to do that.
Thank you. We've got 3 more questions here.
Hello. Thank you. I may have a 2-part question. Sorry about that if it is. So understanding that obviously West Midlands Combined Authority are thinking about social value and getting your understanding right about it, there is an influx and an increase in community interest companies and social enterprises being set up, and sometimes the knowledge about what is social value is not always there with people, and this can be impacted by cultural understandings and language understandings of our use of language compared to the type of people who want to start businesses who may not have the same Eurocentric language. So are there plans to try and make it proportionate to what is being on offer, so the procurement value for what is social value, because not everyone's going to be able to be in the same space at the same time as maybe some more established social enterprises. I don't know if that... Oh, sorry, it's Nabila.
I think it has.
Charles knows me.
I think it has to be proportionate. I don't think you can apply the same rule to every contract. So we need to have a shopping list that's got a range of different things in there that can be delivered, and it would be proportionate to the value of the contract anyway. So you're not going to ask somebody on a £100,000 contract to deliver £50,000 of the sort of value. That's not going to happen. It has to be proportionate.
Thank you.
I think just very quickly on that as well, I think the spur inclusive growth can actually be a really great mechanism into that, because in our fundamentals and the way we talk through what value is, it does open that door. So it's a bit less of a kind of daunting procurement-y process, because I'm not a procurement person either. So it's been quite a new world for me. But I think just, using language that people understand and get along with, regardless of your knowledge, is going to be essential.
Can I just say, the reason that I actually joined the Combined Authority, apart from getting bored with shouting from the car park and seeing it as a source of money, was actually when I looked at the inclusive growth strategy with the Combined Authority, went on the website and looked at what they were actually looking at, I thought, flipping heck, I'm going to be pushing it open doors when I get in there, surely. Because it's really good stuff, and this whole thing about donut economics and the way we think and the way we behave, it made it really attractive to me.
Quickly before we... yeah. Sorry, Charles. My name's David Civil. I work for National Highways. I work in public procurement for a couple of weeks until I move over to Social Value full time. I've seen.
Congrats.
Yes, thank you very much. But in terms of what the two of you are talking about with West Midlands Combined Authority, at Highways and Procurement, we are in the process of a very large procurement, well over 10 billion for our strategic delivery framework. And so much of what you've talked about there, Charles, in terms of CSR versus social value, they're not the same thing. What actually delivers social impact, that's important. Getting that spec right, because if you don't ask for it, you're sure as hell not going to get it. It's not miraculously going to happen. And yeah, absolutely, we're looking at shopping lists that are proportional to the size of the organisations. We're looking at making that a regional thing, that it's lots-based, so that your bigger companies like Kier or similar, you would be expected to deliver more, but what we want in the southwest is not necessarily going to be the same as what's required in the northeast, in terms of ensuring for those bigger companies that your supply chain will deliver a lot of that social impact, whether that is getting NEETs into work, whether it's rehabilitating offenders as they leave prison rather than sometime afterwards. So I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. Sort of the dovetail between the two, with two large public sector procurement organisations getting it and trying to do the same thing. And I'm really sorry about our portal as well, but we do have to try. It does have to. There are hoops we have to jump through in public procurement, and we would love not to. Believe me. Thank you.
Department of Transport opened a social enterprise portal. They did put a tender out and gave us 2 days to put it back, but never mind. Right, name and organisation.
Hello, my name's Gavin Dell, and my organisation is Lead with Story, so just focused on like the data storytelling side of things. So I was really interested because you was talking about, like, we've talked about benchmarking and standardisation, and a bit similar to what was mentioned. So we've got different regions measuring different things, but also then when we look at the different industries, then they're also measuring different things. So in terms of, you might have answered it already, but just thinking in terms of like having that standardization of what gets measured and what's really important, is there like any plans to have like some core metrics that everyone can be standardized across industries, across the social enterprises?
I think I'll try and answer your question if that's okay, and I'll probably call on Charles too. But I think the way that we would look at it is to say, right, according to our strategic priorities, looking at that overall goal of how we're improving living standards, not just as a region, but kind of collaborating with other regions as well. Because I think what's really interesting around social value is we all have I would say, pretty much the same goals, but the way that we need to do them is very different based on place. So the TOMs, the themes, outcomes and measures that we select, I think it's making sure that they are very clear in being connected to our strategic purpose and not having an absolute wave of information thrown at people, making sure it's very specific, very aligned to the goals that we want to see across place. And that's probably the way we do it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think there's a danger in going for too much standardisation because every area is different. So what we do at our West Midlands Combined Authority level, we'd like Walsall or Wolverhampton Council to follow the same principles, but the issues in Walsall or Wolverhampton will be very different to other parts, to they are in Coventry or somewhere else. So you need to allow some flexibility within that. And also when you look at different sectors, there will be different parts that they can address and parts they can't address. So there has to be a framework that's common, that we all approach it in the same way, but the values that you attach to things might have to be different in different areas depending on the needs of that locality. I think that's what we're trying to aim for.
Thank you. Any more questions? I've got one. Oh, sorry, right at the back. Hang on, I'm coming.
Thank you. Fred Rattley, work for Thrive Together Birmingham, a charity addressing poverty and building flourishing neighbourhoods. And I think we've heard a lot today about ecosystems and relationships matter and how people are connected. And I got optimistic earlier in the day about that ecosystem and the potential for achieving it. And I'm now just lost energy thinking, yeah, this potential resource of social value has appeared, and it feels like there's unifying top-down strategy about control that once again isn't going to be a bottom-up. Those people at the bottom in very small organisations who are the potential social enterprises, the assets that hold community together and grow and reflect the diverse neighbourhoods of this city and region, are not going to benefit from this potential because the decisions about what it's going to be spent on and what is important are being set higher up. And I'm left now with a degree of anxiety about that potential.
I think it's a real challenge, you're right, between how we get the split right between ensuring that we've got a uniform approach which is fair and equitable across the entire piece, regardless of your size as an organisation, and also then ensuring that we've got that ground-up approach to, you guys know what your communities need best, you know what your people need best. So how do you bring the two together? And I think this is where, again, I'll go back to kind of our inclusive growth framework, if I may, because what sits underneath that is an evidence base and a set of metrics which are based on where are we not seeing changes to things like living standards, the environment, real life improvement for people and places, and then how do we use those as our benchmarks for success, seeing that change? I think the answer is probably somewhere between, there's got to be some degree of, I think in a way reading between the lines, because you can have quite a wide-ranging indicator or TOM that you want to use. So I think it's how we then ensure that people recognise and are able to interpret that in a way which is supportive to the needs of local communities in that way. So maybe not a full answer to your question, so I might throw it over to Charles, because I've started us off, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're talking here about procurement primarily here. So there are certain parts of the ecosystem that can do certain things. So procurement can do some things, but it can't do everything. So we need to then look at other parts of the ecosystem, like place-based investments. So the stuff we're doing through the social economy, social improvement districts, I'm going to start calling them that from now on. The work that we're doing there is where you can actually get that benefit into communities and get that human interaction into the system. There's stuff around partnerships we can do as well, which gets partnerships with public sector and the private sector and the community sector that will actually enable those small communities to benefit. Procurement is a sort of blunt tool that we can use to leverage our buying power to get more value, but it cannot address some of those issues. What we can do is we can actually be be a lot more specific in the shopping list that says you have to employ local people, you have to, offer apprenticeships or whatever to disadvantaged communities. You've got to be doing this, that, and the next thing. I get asked a lot now by various commissioners and people within the combined authorities, can I be the social value assessor on a contract? And I love doing that. And some of the stuff I've seen has been really quite encouraging. And there's a housing development I think is happening over somewhere in Sandwell. I'm not sure where exactly off the top of my head. But when they asked the stuff about, what impressed me was the way that they'd written the spec of the contract in the first place, which built in a lot of social and community value into it. And then they asked for some additionality on top of that. What the developers came back with was some really interesting stuff about creating a place which was really much focused on people. So every house had solar panels and heat pumps and everything else, but there was lots of different ideas for different types of community space to be built into that development as well. Open parkland, but also, physical space where people could meet. So I think there's scope with the procurement to do more that's going to benefit the community, but it's only one tool. We've got 12 now in our arsenal of things that we want to do. And I think, if we just look at it in the point of view of procurement, we need to look a bit further than that. So there's more stuff we can do.
Okay, thank you. No more questions. I've just got a quick one that I asked this time last year. Combined authority, not counting contracts, what's their spend with the social economy annually?
No idea.
Dan? Anna?
I'm not sure, sorry.
The truth is that we don't know because we don't actually measure it at the moment. But there is an exercise going on to try and actually look at all the contracts we've got at the moment and say how much. If you're going to set a target for how much you're going to spend, you need to know where you're starting from. Because if we're starting at higher than we're setting the target, I'm not going to set a target. I want it to stay high.
Okay. All right. Thank you both. Round of applause for our fabulous panel.